Assalamualaikum, a very good day to all. So we continue our lesson, lecture 13, hazard identification, risk assessment and risk control, which is we call HIRARC. I recall back type of hazard. So generally we have about 6 type of hazard: physical, chemical, biological, electrical, radiation and psychological hazard. Okay, risk management. Risk management is also a safety management system which is include of identifying the hazard that can cause harm or danger and assessing the risk chance at high or low it can harm you, or if it can harm also how serious, how the value of severity. So the next day is risk assessment, which is a risk assessment is a process to identify potential hazard and analyze what could happen if a hazard occurs. And then the next step is controlling the risk, which is we can eliminating the hazard if possible, or we can minimizing if possible, or not we can control the hazard. And the next step is checking and reviewing the risk control. Okay, next topic is risk assessment. Risk assessment is a detailed examination which is you can list down the cause of harm to people so that you can weigh up whether you can take enough precautions or should do more to prevent harm. Workers and others have a right to be protected from harm caused by a failure to take reasonable control measures. So the law does not expect you to eliminate or control all risks due to limited resources, but you are required to protect people as far as it reasonably practicable. Contohnya dekat you punya working area ada lantai basah ataupun tiba-tiba ada tempat bocor kan. So lantai tu basah, you memang tak boleh, you tengah buat kerja, you memang bukan bidang you nak ambil mop semua tu, nak lap, kalau lap pun dia akan lagi still lagi basah. So apa tindakan you yang utama yang boleh protect as far as reasonably practicable? So you just boleh cakap okay, lantai basah kat sini, hati-hati semua, right? So tu pun salah satu cara you tunjuk yang you nak control the risk bila lantai tu basah ataupun at your workplace. Don't overcomplicated the process. Apa sahaja cara yang boleh you prevent or boleh you elakkan sebarang risiko, so you cuba je lah, walaupun dengan sahaja dengan cakap okay, you just warning untuk semua orang demi keselamatan semua orang. So don't overcomplicated the process. In many organisation, the risks are well known and the necessary control measures are easy to apply. You probably already know whether, for example, you have employees who move heavy loads and so could harm their back, and where people are most likely to slip or trip. If so, check that you have taken reasonable precaution to avoid injury. Okay, maksudnya apa? Maksudnya kalau dah memang kerja tu memang untuk angkat barang berat, untuk move dari satu tempat, so memang you tak boleh nak control dah kan kita punya risk tu. Tapi apa yang kita boleh buat, kita boleh control. Maknanya kalau kita boleh buat laluan tu lapang, kalau jatuh apa-apa pun tak ada terkena orang, ataupun pastikan laluan untuk angkat barang tu semua lah, tak ada macam nak stepping down ke stepping up ke yang membolehkan dia mudah jatuh ke. Bila angkat barang tu senang nak tengok jalan ke depan ke. Okey, tu salah satu cara untuk untuk you deal dengan sebarang risk. So you boleh assess lah sebarang risk di dalam tempat kerja. If you run a small organisation and you are confident, you understand what involved, so you can do the assessment by yourself. You don't have to be health and safety expert. Tak semestinya boleh jadi pegawai baru you boleh buat untuk kurangkan, untuk prevent ataupun totally for eliminate the risk. You boleh buat sendiri as long as you can manage the risk assessment. You know what is hazard, what is danger. Okay. Okay, next is how to assess the risk. They have two approaches, qualitative, which is subjective, and quantitative, objective. Okay, qualitative is based on perception or likelihood and consequences. Likelihood, very often and seldom, or consequence, fatal, major and minor. Okay, then for quantitative, is based on historical data or based on ANSI or standard yang telah ditetapkan, or probability of occurrence and consequent direct or indirect cause. Ni saya dah pernah sentuh dalam last lecture saya kan. Okay, for qualitative risk assessment, even it depend on the perception, but we can refer to the rubric of risk metric. So kat sini kita ada frequency of occurrence 1 to 5 and hazard category 1 to 4. Then for risk classification we have a weight factor. So kat sini kita boleh cakap lah bagaimana kita klasifikasikan sebarang risiko itu, teruk ke tak teruk ke, ataupun boleh abaikan saja. Risk can be presented in variety of way to communicate the result of analysis to make decision on risk control. Okay, for risk analysis that use likelihood and severity in qualitative method, presenting result in a risk metric, which is very effective way to communicating the distribution of the risk throughout a plan or area in a workplace. So risk can be calculated using the what we call this risk metric ni kan. Okay. Relative risk value can be used to prioritize necessary action to effectively manage workplace hazard. So this table determine the priority based on the frequency of occurrence. And this table for manage the hazard categories, which is for what we call catastrophic or critical, marginal or negligible. Okay, saya recall balik pasal quantitative approach. For quantitative approach, we can determine the frequency and severity rates. Contohnya untuk frequency rate, which is to determine the frequency of accident or injuries, of severity of injury. So method dia you boleh tengoklah dengan kita punya equation kat sini kan. Okay, they have two standard for quantitative approach, which is based on America's National Standard Institute ANSI. Dia guna nilai untuk overall, nilai B ni ialah 1 million man per hour, right? So kalau kita guna untuk Bureau of Labour Statistic or BLS ni, kita perlu guna untuk bilangan pekerja, full time pekerja, dan kita ditentukan dengan berapa jam pekerja tu bekerja dalam setiap minggu, dan didarab dengan berapa minggu dalam satu tahun. Kat sini contoh pengiraannya. So kalau kita tengok kat sini lebih kurang je jawapan, walaupun kat sini 15, kat sini 3. Untuk ANSI American Standard kita dapat 15.0 per million man hour, dan BLS ni kita dapat 3. Tapi kalau ikut ratio lebih kurang je jawapan dia. Kalau sebabnya ANSI ni dia based on 1 million man per hour kan. Kalau untuk BLS ni kita based on kita punya nilai bilangan pekerja darab dengan jam bekerja untuk calculate untuk 1 tahun. So when frequency rates are cited, it is necessary to know the base. Base tu nilai B tadilah. Base tu either you all nak kira by yang 1 juta tu, by ANSI tu, ataupun bilangan you punya bilangan dalam company you sendiri yang full time kita kira. Okay, for quantitative approach, they have issue in severity rates. Some industry rates may be high, but injury may be minor. Or ada industry few accident may be at low rate, but injury if occur may be severe. Sini you all boleh tengok lah macam mana ANSI use time charges in disabling injury severity rate. Okay, yang ni saya dah cerita, dan slide yang sama juga saya ambil yang last week punya slide kan. Saya dah cerita pasal quantitative approach ni kan. Okay, ni based on ANSI American Standard, dia kira berapa perlu dibayar ataupun injury of severity rate based on ANSI. Okay, this is example to calculate cost using BLS method. So you boleh pilih lah, either you want to use ANSI standard or BLS method. So this one dia tunjuk contoh untuk bayaran pampasan kalau berapa hari dia tercedera. So dia boleh bayar berapa. So you boleh pilih lah yang mana lagi untung untuk you buat pampasan, bayar pampasan kepada pekerja. Okay, for selecting job, this is a simple guidelines to select job to be analyzed. So first, accident frequency, accident severity, judgment and experience, job with high turnover, new job, non-routine job or routine job. Semua tu you all kena study lah before you buat sesuatu kerja. Then after you do a job selection, you can do a risk assessment and then see the outcome of the risk assessment. So you boleh tengok ataupun you boleh buat risk assessment ni by doing risk matrix. This is example of simple risk matrix, and then risk treatment key, which is intolerable risk level, immediate action required, or risk must be reduced so far as is practicable. So yang kalau mana you all pilih semasa you buat risk assessment. After risk assessment, you have to risk management, which is safety management system, which is include identifying the hazard and then assessing the risk, and then controlling the risk and checking and reviewing the risk control. Okay, the next step is risk elimination. This is the best solution. However, sometimes it is not practicable. For example, we use lead-based paint can cause lung cancer. So the solution takkanlah you tak nak guna paint ni kan, walaupun dia ada lead. So you have to replace the type of the paint with the water-based paint. Takkan tak nak guna cat sekalipun kan. So kena lead base tu kena buat lead free lah. Sama juga macam you isi minyak plumber free tu kan, lead free plumber tu kan. So takkanlah you tak nak isi minyak dengan menggunakan diesel. So you kena guna alternatif lain. Kita guna lead free ataupun lead free ataupun PB free tu kan, fuel tu kan. Okay, if we cannot eliminate the risk, so we can minimize the risk, so we can reduce the number of people exposed to the hazard, change with other type although new safer hazard may occur, and then we can reduce the exposure of the hazard. Time we can minimize the risk with the risk control. Okay, untuk elakkan jatuh, we have to wear body harness tu kan. So to prevent the noise, we can wear the ear muff. So such as welding, we can wear a mask, or we can do a shielding. If we found facing with the vibration hazard, we can wear leather glove. Then for chemical hazard, we can wear a safety clothes. Okay, after you do the risk management, so the last step is to review and check. You check the effectiveness of the safety risk management, and then review new hazard and technology. Let's say lah you eliminate or you minimize, you ganti dengan risk control. So you kena review balik lah. Bila you buat risk control ataupun you ganti minimize sebarang risk, ada tak lagi new hazard atau new problem yang akan timbul. In order for us to achieve the objective of managing the organization safety and health at workplace, so we therefore need to look at a systematic process. There is no one way to do a risk assessment. There are many methods that work well, particularly for more complex risks and circumstances. Bukannya ada satu cara je, there are banyak cara untuk kita elakkan sebarang risiko. Yang penting kita kena manage the risk. Okay, risk management step. Risk management is a step-by-step process for controlling health and safety risk caused by hazard in the workplace. So you can do it yourself or appoint a competent person to help you to identify hazard or assess the risk or control the risk. So this risk management step was provided by HCE, Health and Safety Executive National. So step there is about 5 steps to risk assessment, which is step 1 is identify the hazard, second is decide who might be harmed and how, third is evaluate the risk and decide on precautions, fourth is record your findings and implements. And then the last one is review your risk assessment and update if necessary. Okay, in order for us to achieve the objective of OSH, Organization of Safety and Health Act, so we need to look into HIRARC. Okay, kita boleh dengar pula perkataan HIRARC, which is the basic of occupational safety and health. HIRARC is a compound word which is made up of 3 consecutive activities running one after the others. The activities consist of hazard identification, risk assessment and risk control. So HIRARC ni ialah hazard identification, risk assessment and risk control. Was prepared by, kalau kat Malaysia kita panggil Department of Occupational Safety and Health, bawah Ministry of Human Resources Malaysia. Okay, next we will learn about HIRARC. HIRARC is hazard identification. Tu pun saya dah ajar sebelum ni, hazard identification kan, ada type of yang enam type of hazard identification, and risk assessment and risk control. Okay, the same question, why we need to manage hazard, the risk management. So the responsibility to comply with the law, Factory and Machinery Act and Safety and Health Act Okey, semua tu sebab kita tertakluk di bawah akta. So, purpose of HIRARC such as to identify all the factor that may cause harm to employees and others. So, then this what we call HIRARC ni to consider what the chances are of the harm actually by falling anyone in the circumstances of a particular case and the possible severity that could come from it. From the risk tu lah. And then HIRARC ni juga dia punya kepentingan to enable employers to plan, introduce and monitor preventive measures to ensure that the risks are adequately controlled all the time. Okay, salah satu mandatory akta under the law. So it is one of the general duties as prescribed from under the Occupational Safety and Health Act 1994 for the employers to provide a safety workplace to their employees and other related person. So kalau nanti you all dah masuk kerja, you all rasa tempat kerja you tak selamat, you all boleh refer dengan management ataupun you all boleh report lah dekat kita punya OSH nanti ataupun kita panggil DOSH nanti kan. Okey, ni contoh-contoh buku, contoh-contoh yang ada tertakluk kepada akta kilang semua tu lah. So, the purpose of the guideline is to provide a systematic and objective approach to assessing hazard and their associated risk that will provide an objective measure of an identified hazard as well as provide a method to control the risk. It is one of the general duties as prescribed under the Occupational Safety and Health Act 514 tu for the employers to provide a safe workplace to their employee and other related person. The related person ni dia punya tetamu lah yang datang atau dia kita punya officer yang datang melawat ke, untuk semua orang perlu sediakan workplace yang selamat. Okay, the next point tadi, first point is sebab kita tertakluk kepada Akta 514 tadi kan. So, why we need to manage hazard? Sebab the second one is to comply with the management system standard. Kita ada MH 1722 pada tahun 2003, OHS SAS kat sini, ISO dan banyak lagi lah yang standard-standard piawai yang kita perlu ikut. The third point is to enable an organization to manage hazard effectively. So the fourth one is to identify whether the current control is sufficient at all times. So kalau tak okey, kita akan revise balik lah kita punya peraturan-peraturan atau akta-akta yang telah ditetapkan. When we talk about HIRARC ni, kita mesti kena fikir 3 benda: hazard identification, risk assessment and risk control. Okey, untuk yang ni hazard identification, risk assessment and risk control ni saya dah bincangkan masa last lecture saya. So saya revise balik. Hazard identification is the recognizing of things which may cause injury or harm to a people. Risk assessment is the looking at the possibility of injury or harm which is occur to a person if exposed to a hazard. And then risk control is the introduction some management of measure which will eliminate or reduce the risk of person being exposed to a hazard. Okay, please remember, before the process of identifying any hazard begin, it is necessary to know how to classify what is hazard, risk and danger. Kalau you all tak tahu bezakan hazard apa, risk apa, danger apa, macam mana you nak buat risk management tu kan? Macam mana you nak identify the hazard semua tu? So, hazard, anything that can cause harm, anything that have possibility to cause a danger. Okay, risk is a probability of harm actually been done. Danger is relatively exposed to a hazard. We can summarize the process of HIRARC require 4 simple steps. First, classify work activities, and then you have to identify hazard. Contohnya you all activity you all kalau kelas ni you all nak pergi buat lawatan ke mana? Ke mana, ke apa, Penang Bridge ke apa kan, dekat dia punya construction site semua tu. So you then you have to identify the hazard. Apa hazard yang akan berlaku sekeliling you semua, identify. And C, conduct the risk assessment, analyze and estimate risk from each hazard by calculating or estimating. So daripada situ, daripada risk assessment tu lah you boleh decide apa risikonya tinggi ke rendah, perlu bawa apa untuk kurangkan risiko semua tu. And then the last one is decide if risk is tolerable and apply control measure if necessary. Kalau just you all cuma perlu bawa safety boat ke apa, let's say lah you all nak pergi melawat kilang smelting corporation ke ataupun kilang mining ke, so you all kena fikirlah untuk kurangkan risiko terkena percikan ke, you all kena pakai safety topi tu kan, ataupun you all kena pakai safety boot ke. So daripada situ you boleh decide lah if the risk is tolerable and apply control measures. Okay, here the contoh of process flowchart untuk HIRARC proses tu lah. So bila implement, you all kena review balik untuk identify hazard tu time by time, periodically. So the purpose of hazard identification is to highlight the critical operation of tasks, that is those tasks posing significant risk to the health and safety of employees, as well as highlighting those hazards pertaining to certain equipment due to such as energy sources, working condition or activities performed. Hazard biasalah kita boleh divided into banyak jenis peringkat kan, ada about 6 peringkat, ada physical, chemical, safety, environment hazard semua tu. So semua tu you perlu identify all the hazard, and then you do risk assessment, prepare risk control action, if necessary then implement. Okay, tu je lah, habis dah untuk tajuk ni. Okay, that's all for today. Jangan lupa you all kena scan barcode and isi untuk attendance lah. Kalau ada sebarang masalah, terus WhatsApp saya ataupun Dr. Syami. Okay, kalau ada apa-apa soalan, kita bawa kepada last lecture saya hari Isnin ni ataupun hari Jumaat. Okay, nanti before I start the class, saya akan tanyalah apa-apa masalah ataupun sebarang persoalanan. Okay, jangan lupa scan barcode and fill the attendance. Thank you. Assalamualaikum.